Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to the session on Chevening Scholarships. Um, you guys already know each other, and you guys know my face really well because I've been talking to you these past few weekends. But we have some new faces here today, some very special new faces, and I'll be introducing them to you very soon. So as always, we start with our outline. So first, you will get a bit of an introduction about Project Edu Access, which some of you might already know. And then you will meet your exciting panelists who will take you through what the Chevening Scholarship is about, what you need to apply, how to apply, and then we will also go through an overview of what your essay should look like, application timelines, your references, interviews, selection criteria, and then towards the end we will have some time for Q&A as well. So a little bit about Project Edu Access. So we have one of our co-founders here. So Gayatri is, yes, she's not turned on her video, but she's here as well. So Project Edu Access is a student founded attempt to improve inclusivity in higher education spaces beyond the global south. So what we basically do is via 4 key interventions, mentoring, counseling, role modeling, information advice and guidance, capacity building and leadership skill development, and evidence-based advocacy. We aim to link mentees from marginalized communities in the global south. Right now, we operate in South Asia, um, India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and now Sri Lanka. And we link them with mentors from similar backgrounds who have successfully applied for and are completing or have completed um, uh, postgraduate degrees in foreign universities. But I will shut up now, and you will now hear from our distinguished panelists today, who are both Chevening scholars. So first we have Nath Gunawardena. He's currently following an LLM at the University of Edinburgh. And we have Nalanga, who is a Chevening alumna of 2021, 2022, and she completed her MSc in Cognitive and Evolutionary Anthropology at the University of Oxford. So I will now let Nalanga take over, and she will talk to you a bit about the Chevening Scholarship. Okay.
Thank you, Radhini, and thanks to Project Edu Access for this opportunity to speak about Chevening with everyone who's interested, who has joined us today, and I welcome all of you. And so yeah, without spending much time speaking about anything else, I'll get straight to the topic. And so yeah. So Chevening, as you can see on the slide, is a UK government's international scholarship program. So it was mainly handled by the UK FCDO, or Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office. And I think right now they are also involved in the British Council with some of the administrative work, but either way, it's handled by the UK government. And this is exclusively offered to international students. So you don't really, if you're a British citizen, this is not something for you, but this is for people outside of the UK. And this supports future change makers and leaders by funding postgraduate studies in a range of different study formats in the UK. So mainly, the Chevening Scholarship is looking for people who are good with leadership skills, people who are good at maintaining and initiating networks. And basically, it's an effort by the UK's government to make alliances with people from around the world, and to provide them an opportunity to do their masters in the UK, as well as to have long-term relationships with these students who then graduate from the UK universities and go around the world into their specific fields and do good things in their own industries, and to keep in touch with the UK. So it's more like a networking, friendship sort of scholarship that the UK has initiated with the rest of the world. And the scholarship covers tuition fees, monthly stipend. So the tuition fee is fully covered for most programs except for MBAs. If you plan on applying to an MBA, there is a tuition fee cap, which means there's a maximum amount that this scholarship will cover. And I think it's around £25,000, but that could be in my year and that could have changed now. But there is a cap for the tuition fee if you're doing an MBA. But if you're doing any other masters, which is of just 1 year, the full tuition fee is covered by the scholarship. And this is provided jointly by the university that you'd be studying at, which will provide 20% of the scholarship, and 80% of it will be provided by the FCDO or the UK government. And there is a monthly stipend, which I would personally say is absolutely enough to sort of spend on all your expenses, as well as to actually enjoy travel around a little bit. I think it's up to you to sort of economically handle your finances and to be responsible about the way you go about your stipend. But from my experience, I can say that it was very generous and I could enjoy my time in the UK as well as sort of spend on all the necessities with this stipend. And if you are planning to study in London, or if you get into a university in London, you will have a slightly higher stipend than others because the expenses in London, or the living cost in London, is slightly more expensive than the other towns and cities in the UK. The airfare to and from the UK is provided to you as well. So when you first go to the UK and when you come back after the completion of your program, these two airfares are covered. Visa application cost is covered. So basically, I think you will have to pay for the TB test or tuberculosis test, which you need for the visa, but then that is also refunded. But the visa process itself, you don't have to pay at any point. It's handled by usually by the High Commissioner in your respective country. The High Commission, sorry. And arrival and departure allowance, this is also in addition to your stipend. The first month you'll be there, and the last month when you come back, you will be given another small allowance for you to sort of settle down, to buy your necessities, or to even, I think there's also a luggage allowance when you go back. If you want to carry some extra luggage, you will be given a small amount for that as well. And the travel grant to attend Chevening events in the UK. So this is not provided for every single scholar, but it works as, so it's more like a raffle draw most of the time. Some of these events are funded, and you can enter the draw. You will be randomly chosen, and then if you get chosen to attend an event in a different city, your travel cost and any other expenses will be covered by Chevening. But you can also spend from your stipend and attend these events if you don't get selected to some of them as well. Okay, I think we can go to the next slide. Okay, so speaking about eligibility, I'm assuming that most of the participants today in this call are probably Sri Lankan. So as you know, Sri Lanka is a country that is eligible. So being a citizen of a Chevening eligible country or territory is essential. And there should be a commitment to returning to your home country for at least 2 years after you finish your scholarship or you complete your studies. So this is absolutely mandatory, and I want to emphasize that a lot of people ask me when they, need help with Chevening, whether is there any way that they could sort of circumvent this condition, stay in the UK, take on a job, or go to another country? I would advise you not to do that because, ethically speaking, the money is technically, these funds are allocated to your country, and it's your country that chooses you to represent it and take this money on behalf of your country and go and do something worthwhile with it. So I think you do have an obligation to return to your home country and sort of provide a service to the place where you got this scholarship from, essentially. So this commitment is very important. I would emphasize on that. Have at least 2 years of work experience. So that is 2,800 hours, which is roughly about 35 hours a week, if I'm not mistaken. But if your sort of work hours exceed 2,800 hours, that is not really a big problem. You can still apply to this scholarship. And for the eligibility, this particular eligibility criteria, I would say you can also include voluntary work. So even if you were unpaid for some of the work that you did, if you worked for organizations like ISEC or even I think Rotaract, you can include these hours as well. And but make sure that you mention clearly that these were voluntary work hours. I think the only condition was that you can't ideally use an internship that was part of your degree as your work experience. If I'm wrong, please correct me, Nath, because I don't know if some of these conditions have changed over time. I'm assuming no.
No,
Uh,
I think you can't use your internship as long as it was a mandatory component of your degree.
yes, degree,
But if you
yes.
did something voluntarily while you were doing your degree, that's fine. That's permitted. But if it's a mandatory component, that doesn't
And
count.
yes. So say, for example, if you are an MBBS student and you have your placements, I don't think you can use those, right? Because that's part of your sort of syllabus, essentially. I also want to clarify that we also, as a psychology student, I did an internship in my final year, but we had a mandatory number of hours or number of weeks that we had to do this internship for. But I was able to speak to the hospital that I was working in and do some extra work. And I clarified with the Chevening officer at the time, and they said that the extra work that I did can count as work hours because that was not mandatory. So those sort of flexibilities might be there, right? In case you're concerned about something like that. You have to hold an undergraduate degree that qualifies you for a UK master's program. So this you have to check on the particular websites of the master's programs that you're applying to. So you go to the university websites, check the eligibility criteria of the 3 universities that you plan on sort of nominating for your Chevening scholarship, and see if your current degree that you hold is eligible for admission to these programs first. And then if you are eligible to do your master's with the current degree that you hold, then that would be okay with Chevening as well. So apply to 3 different and eligible UK university courses. So here, let me clarify, you can apply to 2 different courses from the same university as well. Or you can even apply to 3 different courses from the same university, which not many people actually do because that's quite risky. Because if the university does not think that you're a good match and you don't get selected, you might get rejected from all 3 programs. So that is quite risky. So I wouldn't advise you to do that. So go for maybe 2 or at least 2 or ideally 3 different universities which offer very similar programs. So you should be able to explain why these 3 choices are your 3 choices. So you shouldn't ideally be picking something like an MBA along with a law degree, along with a degree in healthcare, right? It should be, if that is your choice, then you should justify that, which is difficult to do. But it does not have to be the same exact title, because this is something that people have asked me in the past. Because if you do a psychology master's in one university, does it have to be psychology master's in the other 2 as well? Not essentially, because my 3 choices were, one was in social psychology, another one was in health psychology, and the other one was in anthropology, which I ended up going to. It just has to be a bit related, that's all, right? So you have to have these 3 choices. You must have received an unconditional offer from at least one of these course choices by the deadline mentioned. So this is not the same deadline as the application deadline. This is a deadline that comes much later, even after you get selected to the interview round. And I think even after you get selected for a scholarship, the deadline would be then, because even by the time you get into your interviews, or you do your face your interviews, you don't really have to have an offer by then. Eventually you have to have an offer if you get selected for the scholarship. So yeah, any of the 3 choices, if you get into at least one of them, you will be able to go. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. Okay. Work experience. So before applying for a Chevening scholarship, you need at least 2 years of work experience, and this should be complete by the time you submit your application. So you cannot ideally speak about work that you would have completed, you would be completing in the middle of this application process or selection process. So by November 5th, which is the deadline for this year, I think, you should have 2 years of work experience. So the good news is that you can still count in voluntary work experience and all of those different types of work, part-time, anything. The types of work experience that are eligible include full-time employment, part-time employment, voluntary work, paid or unpaid internships, except for mandatory internships, which are part of a degree program. Okay. So work experience can be completed before, during, or after graduating from your undergraduate studies, which means even if you worked part-time during your studies, which is actually something that I did. Some of my work experience came from being a research assistant to a PhD student while I was still in my third year. And this was something that they still accepted. So you can include those as well. However, employment undertaken as part of your undergraduate or postgraduate course are not eligible. If you are self-employed, for example, if you did some small business during university, this is something that could be a bit tricky because ideally in other countries, they might have some proof to show that they've registered their business. So if you have such a business ongoing, maybe that could be something you could use, but otherwise, I'm not really sure if that is a good idea to sort of present here. You will be asked to provide details of your work experience in the application form. This includes the name of your employer, job title, and dates of employment, which is why I said that sort of self-employment could be a little tricky to explain. While you do not need to provide proof of employment, if you are shortlisted for interview, you'll be asked to provide references, which will be verified by the British Embassy or High Commission. So one of these references would be from your work. One will be academic, one will be professional. So I highly advise you not to include any wrong information in any part of your application. Please do not include any false information because at any stage of the application, they could verify this information. Okay, we can move to the next slide, I think. Is this something, this is still my section, right, Nath? I'm a little confused at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So speaking about calculating work experience, you will be required to input the number of weeks and hours that you worked for every job that you will be listing in your employment history section of the application form. So you can add up to 15 entries of past work experience. So if you are someone who does not really have any solid work experience and you're thinking of little projects that you did, which were maybe 5 days long, 4 days long, there is a limit, which is 15. So you can't really add up more than 15 different types of work, but 15 is quite generous. And I think if you have 2 years of work experience, it would be much less than 15. Your entries will be calculated automatically by multiplying the number of weeks worked by the number of hours worked per week. So there is a system in the portal where it would be automatically calculated. So you just have to enter the number of weeks and hours. So 2,800 hours of work equates approximately 2 years of full-time employment based on the assumption that full-time employment employees work on an average of 35 hours per week and 40 weeks per year. So this is technically how full-time work happens. But if you are including part-time work or any other form of work, your calculation might be a little differently sort of added up. But either way, it just has to be 2,800 hours roughly. However, if you have worked for 2,800 hours in less than 2 years by working more than 35 hours per week, you are still eligible. So that is not a problem. You may meet the 2,800 hours of work experience requirement over a longer period than 2 years. For example, if you worked part-time, you can calculate work from before 2 years as well. To calculate the number of hours worked, the application system will automatically multiply your weekly hours. This is, I think, mentioned before as well. So if you are confused about this particular section, I think maybe in the Q&A, you can ask more questions and we can clarify it. But in the interest of time, I will move forward and go to the next slide. Right. Degree requirement. So to speak about this, like I said, it's essential that you go to the university website and the master's website that you are planning to apply to, or the 3 choices, and check the eligibility criteria on those websites, because that is the eligibility that will be taken into consideration here as well. So most of the time for a UK master's, you need a 4-year degree or a special degree. There are occasions in which I've heard of some people with a general degree pursuing a master's in the UK, but this is rare. Most people have a 4-year special degree where you specialized in one particular discipline. So to be eligible for a Chevening Scholarship, you should have an undergraduate degree that will enable you to gain entry into a postgraduate program. So most sort of well-ranked universities look for a special 4-year degree with at least a 2.1 sort of grade, which is a second class upper, or in terms of the GPA, it might be slightly different for different universities. I think roughly about a 3.5 out of 4 GPA. This is usually a basic criteria for many well-ranked universities in the UK. And you should check the exact requirement of your degree of choice. Like I said, some degrees have a higher requirement. For example, universities like Oxford or Russell Group universities like Oxford, Edinburgh, Cambridge, UCL, these sort of very high-ranked universities do say that the eligibility is at 2.1 or a second class upper, but most people who apply do have a first class, and most people who get in tend to have a first class. But that is still not something you should sort of change your decision on. You can still apply if you are eligible. You must already have graduated, so that is extremely important. If you are still in your third or second year, this round of application might not be for you, but of course, attending this session is very important because you can work on getting qualified for Chevening in the couple of years that you have left in your degree. But currently, to be able to apply this year before the 5th of November, which is in the upcoming 2 weeks, you should have completed your degree already. You can't apply for a Chevening scholarship in the final year or any other year of your undergraduate studies. You should already have completed your degree. But let me also clarify that if you have a transcript or any official document to prove that you completed your studies and exams and you received your final award, you would be able to apply even if you haven't had your graduation, because graduation is just basically a ceremony, or it's just a formality, and that is not really important. Even if you've not had your convocation or graduation, that is okay, as long as you have your official documents to prove that you don't have anything else to do yourself, such as any thesis work or exams left. Right. Let's move to the next slide, I think. Right. So this section is on choosing courses for Chevening. So on your Chevening scholarship application form, you will be needed to submit 3 UK master's degree choices in order of preference. So there will be your first choice, second choice, and third choice. And when you select these 3 choices, the first thing you need to do is there is a tool on the Chevening website for you to go and check whether this particular program is eligible for a Chevening scholarship. So you just have to type in the title and the university name, the title of the program and the university, and you will see if that is eligible. And you will see that most of the 1-year master's programs around the UK, in any part of UK, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, England, in any part of these, if it's a 1-year master's, you'd see that it is very likely to be eligible. So it's very unlikely that you'll find a 1-year master's which is not eligible. So the first thing to do is to go to this search tool and check if you actually have selected a program or 3 choices that are eligible. And then I would also, this is just a tip, I would also say, if you are not completely confident that you will get into all 3 of these choices, I would say go for a good, very well-ranked university as well, if you think you have a chance, but also have a sort of like a safety net if you're not entirely sure that you will get into your first choice. And so if your current sort of undergraduate results or your bachelor's degree results aren't very strong, I would say go for a 3 different choices of 3 different levels of universities, just to be safe. And you have to apply separately for your course, and that is completely up to you, and that's not something that is handled by Chevening. It's your job to get into your university and present your offer letter. So you have to also apply along with your Chevening scholarship. You have to apply to these universities, but by the time you submit your Chevening application, you don't have to have even started your applications yet, and that is not a problem. So you can start your applications even after you submit your Chevening application, which is what I did. So my deadlines were mostly in December, but the Chevening deadline was in November. So by the time I applied, I've chosen my 3 choices and I've let them know, but I haven't applied to any of them. That's not a problem. But of course, don't delay that either. So your Chevening application does not have an application attached to your universities. It's very completely separate. The courses that you choose must have these essential criteria. Full-time, it has to be full-time. You can't apply for part-time courses. And then start in autumn term, so usually September or October, so you can't go for any other term starting date, such as January, which I think some universities, for example, Cambridge has a January sort of admissions cycle as well, but you can't apply to programs that start in any other time of the month other than autumn, so September, October. It has to be a taught master's. It can't be a research master's. Usually, most research masters are 2 years or MPhil programs anyway, so it has to be a taught master's. And it has to be leading to a master's degree qualification. So it has to be at MSc, or it might be having some other titles like MST, MSc, but it has to be a master's level qualification, and it has to be within the UK. So that is England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. Please do not mistake Ireland as a part of UK. This is a common confusion that happens quite a lot. I've seen people sort of asking me whether they can apply to Dublin with the Chevening Scholarship. Please remember that Ireland is not a part of the UK, so Irish universities are not eligible. So courses cannot be part-time or distance learning, so you have to be based in the UK, you have to go there. Less than 9 months or more than 12 months in duration. You can apply to 9-month programs. For example, the LLM, I think at Oxford, the MPP program at Oxford, these are 9-month programs, which are very common destinations for Chevening scholars, which is completely fine. So yeah, it can't be more than 12 months either. So it can't be, 1.5 years or 2 years. It can't be a PhD, it can't be a DPhil. These are not eligible. Taught with more than 1 month of study outside of the UK. So you can't spend more than 1 month outside of the UK. Your program could have a component where you get to visit another country or a university for a short period of time, like a week or 2 for some sort of training or research interest. I don't know. But it can't be more than 1 month outside of the UK. You can't also return to Sri Lanka for more than 1 month. And if you return to Sri Lanka during your studies, you have to inform the Chevening Secretariat. And also, if it's exceeding 1 month, your stipend will be reduced for the period that you will be outside of the UK. And yes, I think we can move on to the next slide. Right, I will quickly wrap this up as well because we are kind of running out of time. All applications for Chevening must be completed via the online application system. So you can't email any documents, you can't send an application through an email or any other way. You have to go through this particular portal. So you have to register online with your basic details. You have to pass the eligibility checker to show that you are a citizen of an eligible country. You are applying to 3 eligible programs and you meet the work experience requirement. Make a note of your access code. You will be given a code at the time of the registration. You will be emailed the code as well. Complete each section of the application form. So you can't submit an incomplete application that will be withdrawn, or it will be it won't be moving forward. Sections on personal details, immigration details, education history, work history, programs of study, referees, essay questions, and equal opportunities. So these are the different sections of the application process. So sections on the personal details, basically your name, email address, these sort of things. You do need your passport number. So if you do not have a passport, and if you want to apply this year, I suggest that you try to get a 1-day service passport done, if that is possible, because without a passport, you can't apply. It's absolutely necessary. The essay questions, I think Nath will be explaining, so I'm not going to go into that. Immigration details, that's about your sort of citizenship, where are you based right now, these sort of details. Education history, I don't have to explain, your degrees and any other type of work, and then work history. Programs of study, these are your 3 choices. Your referees, 1 academic and 1 professional. And equal opportunities is just for them to monitor which sort of people from which background are applying to the scholarship. So that's not something that will be considered for in the decision-making process, but that's just for the sort of information. So that's all. And then you get to submit your application when all of this is done. Yeah, so if you have any questions on anything that I covered or anything else at all, maybe we can take them at the end. And I will like to, I think, pass on to Nath to continue from here.
Thanks so much, Nang. So I'll be stopping my screen share and Nath, you can take over.
Thanks, Nalanga, and thanks, Radhini. First of all, can you all hear me clearly? Right? Okay. Let me just share my screen. Oops, sorry. Share from. Right. Okay. So I'll be covering the two main components of the selection process. So that means you have your essay and you have the interview. And out of these two, I'll be focusing mostly on the essays because I think that's what you are most interested in at this point. And I think there'll be future workshops on the interview process once you get shortlisted. So since we have limited time, I'm just going to give you an overview. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask during the Q&A, and we can go into more details. So for those of you who have already checked the application, you would have realized that there are 4 essays that you have to write. Now, one thing I want to point out is that even though there are 4 essays, try to think of it as one essay in the sense of you're trying to give the Chevening selection committee your story. So you're trying to tell one big story that's broken down into 4 essays, right? So the essays are on leadership and influence, networking and relationship building, studying in the UK, and the career plan that you have. So I'll be going into each of these in detail when we look at the criteria. So I'll be getting to this. But essentially, you have to write 4 essays. Each has a 500-word limit. But try to think of these 4 essays as this one cohesive story that you're trying to tell the selection committee. Because I think that's a very useful tip that I got. There has to be some sort of connection between the 4 essays. It can't be completely unrelated. And I'll tell you what I mean by this when we go into the selection criteria. So it is generally recommended that you prepare your answers to the questions in a separate document before copying and pasting. So most of this, what's on the slide, you'll see most of it on the Chevening website as well, some of the advice that's given. And this is absolutely a must, right? You can't just wait until the application deadline is close by and then quickly write out the essays. Try to work on it separately, whether it's on Word or whatever. Have drafts and continuously keep editing it. That's the most important thing. It's very difficult to write a good essay and get selected within, let's say, a very short period of time, a couple of days or weeks. So I know you only have around a month left now, or less than a month actually. But if you haven't started, start your drafts and keep updating them continuously, keep coming back to them. So this is what the timeline is like. I think you would have seen this also on the website. So you have to submit your application by the 5th of November. That's the deadline for submitting your full application, including the essays. And then mid-February 2025, that's where you'll be shortlisted for the interview stage. So as I told you, there are 2 main hurdles you have to work on. The first is the essays. Before that, there's sort of like a sifting of eligibility. So they'll check whether you have the required academic qualifications or the basic, the work requirement that Nalanga spoke about. All of that is sifted first. And then it's the essays. Your essays are sent to reading committees, and then they shortlist candidates for the interviews. So once you have been shortlisted, that's when you'll have to actually submit your references. So as Nalanga mentioned, you have to mention 2 references or 2 referees in your application. But in the application at this stage, you just need to provide their name and contact details. The actual letters, the reference letters you have to submit at this stage after you're shortlisted for the interview. I hope that's clear. Then after that, the candidates will be interviewed by panels at British Embassy. So it's the High Commission in Sri Lanka that does the interview process. So you'll be called for an in-person interview at the High Commission. And this is the point at which you have to finalize your 3 course choices. So Nalanga spoke to you about selecting 3 universities. You have to mention those choices in your application, but at the interview, it's set in stone. There is an opportunity for you to say, okay, I want to change this option, but you can only do that up to the interview stage. After the interview, you can't change your 3 course choices. And if you are unable to get into any of these 3 courses afterwards, then unfortunately, you will have to drop out. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, Nath. Let me also clarify that you can't introduce a completely new course at this stage either. You can just change the order of preference.
In our year, we were allowed to.
But this
something.
year I was in the interview panel, and they've actually said, I think so.
Right.
So yeah, it could be different the next year, but that is something that they might clarify halfway through. When you get into the interview stage, they might clarify it.
Yeah.
But in some of the years, including this year, they did not allow you to introduce a new course. You were allowed to change the 3 choices. That's all.
Oh, okay, right.
Preference order.
Yeah, someone who is in my, I did it personally as well. One of the course choices, I added a new one. I didn't end up going for that, but I added a new course at the interview stage. That was the message we got. So maybe it will change year by year.
Yeah.
So yeah. So then the results of the interviews will be released, and then that's where you will get what we call the final award letter. So it is at this stage that your Chevening award will be confirmed, and then so you'll get the results of the interview, and after that you have to give your final offer, and afterwards they confirm your award. So it's only after you receive your university offer that they will confirm your award. This is saying that you have been conditionally selected for an award, and you will receive your final award after you give your university offer. Nalanga, no issues, right, with that? Yeah, okay. Next, I'll quickly go through some of the points about referees. So in your application form, like I mentioned, you just need to mention the contact details and the names of your referees. At this stage, by the 5th of November, all you need are the names and the contact details of the referees. The reference letters that you have to submit when you're shortlisted for the interview. And as Nalanga mentioned, so this is again what I got from the website. It said that it can be 2 professional or 2 academic, but the general recommendation, the advice is to get 1 professional referee and 1 academic referee. I think that's good because 2 of the main criteria that they take into account is your work experience and your degree, your academic qualifications, right? So it's good to have 1 professional and 1 academic referee. So Chevening will not contact your referees for you. You must collect and upload the references yourself. That's important. Even though you provide the contact details and names, you have to get the letters from the referees and upload it through the portal, right? The reference must include the referee's contact details, the length of time the referee has known the applicant, the capacity in which the referee knows them, and when the referee had last regular contact with the applicant. So all of this you can find on the Chevening website. Advice for referees is given. There's a separate page for that, and they say what the reference should include. So in brief, this is what it says: skills in leadership and networking, personal, intellectual, and interpersonal qualities, and the ability to complete a demanding academic program in the UK. So basically, your referee is vouching for whether you will be able to undergo this academically rigorous course in the UK, and also why you deserve a Chevening scholarship, right? So make sure you select your referees very strategically. Make sure that the referees, whoever you get, isn't going to give you a very sort of a generic reference that they give for everyone at the office. Try to make sure the reference stands out as well and addresses all this. So similar to your essays, your references will also play a huge role in how the selection committee perceives you. So be very strategic about that. So after this, after you've submitted your referees, once you go to the interview, there'll be 3 members in the panel. So usually you will have someone from the High Commission, a member of staff from the High Commission, the Chevening officer, and a Chevening alum. And I think Nalanga can talk about this in the Q&A, having been on that side of the table as well. Usually someone who has received a Chevening award in the past, someone from the High Commission staff, and your Chevening officer will be the interview panel generally. So these are scheduled in March or April. You will be given an option to select from multiple slots. So once you get to that stage, in the portal itself, you'll have to choose which slot you want for the interview. And this is important. Your interview is basically a review of your 4 essays themselves. This is where your essays will sort of get fact-checked to a certain extent, and also you will get to build on what you said in your essays. It is one of the stages at which the selection committee will be able to identify whether you're the one who actually wrote your essays and whether you actually believe in what you wrote in your essays, because the interview questions will be connected to those 4 topics that I mentioned earlier. So I'll go into those 4 topics separately because it will help you with both your essays as well as your interview. So this, I would say, the 4 essays, those 4 topics are the most fundamental when it comes to telling Chevening why you deserve this scholarship. So there may be some additional general questions, but these are unlikely to be technical questions specific to your discipline or field of study. So it can be general questions. Usually they start with asking you to introduce yourself. And then I remember in my interview, I was asked, what else do you want to do in the UK besides study? And this is the point at which you get to put out a bit of yourself, because in the essays and your career plan, all of that, you'll be talking about why you want this scholarship to pursue a certain degree. But at this point, when it comes to these general questions, you can add more of your personal touch. You can talk about who you are as an individual. And this shows that you're not just there to study whatever course there is. So questions like the question I was asked about, what do you want to do in the UK? I spoke about things that I've grown up with, whether it's visiting the 100-acre woods from Winnie the Pooh or like the Sherlock Holmes Museum. One of the reasons I picked Edinburgh was because Arthur Conan Doyle was from there. Other things that you would like to do in the UK besides study. So think about these things. I'm sure there'll be other programs as is mentioned on the slide as well. Edu Access will have some other workshops closer to the date. But this is what will happen generally at the interview. So do we have time? Yes, because this is the most important part. I want to talk about the selection criteria. So as I told you earlier, there are these 4 essays that you have to write. And in the selection criteria, it's broken down into 3 where you have leadership and networking together. So how you demonstrate this is, one is through the 2 essays that you write about leadership and networking. And we'll go into the essays in detail. But don't forget that your work experience and your referees, they also speak towards these 2 topics, these 2 criteria. So for example, when you're listing your work experience, you would have seen in the application, you have to give a brief overview of some of the roles and responsibilities you had in that role. So try to make sure that there is some coherence between that and what you're writing about in your essay. Like I told you, this is all, your entire application is one big story about you. So your essays have to complement what you say in your work, what you have put down as your work experience, the things that your referees are going to write about you, all of this, there has to be some sort of cohesion. So that's what I mean here by your work experience, and your references will also speak to your leadership and networking abilities. Next criterion is your plan of study. So there's a separate essay on studying in the UK, And there you talk about your course choices, your university choice, as well as your choice of the UK as opposed to any other country, because you have so many scholarships and all that in other countries as well. So your study plan should talk about why you chose the UK, why you chose that particular university, and why you chose those specific courses. So in addition to your essay, you should also have your 3 course choices that you've selected, right? And Nalanga gave examples of how even if you choose slightly different courses, it has to make sense. And one of the ways you can get it to make sense is in your essay on studying in the UK. So we'll take the example Nalanga gave, anthropology and psychology. Why are you opting for 2 different courses? In your essay, you can maybe explain what your actual interest is in, and how a course in psychology or a course in anthropology can both lead you to what you really want to achieve. So make sure that there's this cohesion. Career goals. This again is, there's a separate essay for that, but in addition to it, similar to what I said about networking and leadership, make sure that your courses and your work experience sort of align with your career goals. Just a small caveat here, even though maybe you have worked in a different sector previously, if you want to pivot and you want to make a shift to a different field, that's permitted. I know a few Cheveners this year who have completely switched their area of work, but you have to justify it. That's important. In your essays and later in the interview, if you want to make a career shift, you have to justify why you're doing that. As long as you can do it, there is no rule against doing one thing before and then planning to do something after your course. Just make sure that you can justify it. Okay. So now the essays in detail. So this was taken from the FAQs, like how Chevening scholars are selected. They've given 4 criteria from what the reading committees are looking for. So the reading committees want to see that applicants have influenced the opinions of others in a professional context or voluntary organization. Applicants will provide at least one detailed example of influencing others to achieve something. They will evidence the steps they took and give details about the result. Above all, they will show a real determination to achieve. So this is your leadership essay. This is the first essay, essentially. You have to show that you are able to take up leadership roles and then influence the way people work or the way people think. That's what you have to do in your first essay. It's not about writing a lot about what you think about leadership and then talking about your favorite leaders. None of that. It specifies that applicants will provide at least one detailed example of how they have already done this. So obviously you'll have to balance being idealistic, which will come later in your career goals and all that. But you have to show how you've already been a leader, how you have already been influential in whatever sector you have worked in. And it doesn't have to be professional either. Show that you have been able to successfully lead and influence others. And finally, show a real determination to achieve. So influencing others or taking leadership is for an ultimate goal or purpose, right? Something that you believe in, being able to achieve that using whatever influence you're able to exert. The second one is experience building professional relationships. Applicants will share their ideas for engaging with networks, including Chevening, in future. Outstanding answers will share how they use their networking skills to achieve a positive outcome. So this networking essay is what I found personally most challenging because I'm not a person who networks a lot. But if you really think about what they're asking you to do is, you have to show how you're able to sort of get people together or build some sort of network. It can be academic networks, professional networks, or social networks, getting people together in pursuance of some positive outcome. And to show how you were sort of the catalyst in getting people to work towards that positive outcome. That's essentially what you have to do. And this is something that you'll have to convince Chevening of. And when you're writing all your essays, even though it's mentioned here, just think about this for all the essays as well, how you're going to use the Chevening network, because Chevening is not just a scholarship. Once you get the scholarship, you're not done. You become part of this network of scholars that are supposed to be change makers. So constantly refer to how Chevening and the Chevening network can help you achieve any of these things that you're talking about. So don't forget about this. Professional or academic experience, applicants will demonstrate knowledge of their chosen course and universities. This is where Chevening will get an idea about whether you have actually done your research and carefully thought out which courses you're picking. It's not picking your courses or picking your universities is not a simple matter of going to the university rankings or QS rankings or whatever and selecting the top 3, or just picking a university in the city where you have family staying. It's not something like this. This essay will tell the selection committee whether you have actually thought this through. You have decided why you have actually thought about why the UK is the best for you, why this particular university is the best option, and why you're taking this specific course. So for example, if you take LLMs, masters in law, there are different specialisms within law. You have to be able to justify why you picked this specific specialism, and you can even talk about specific courses in that program. So you will have different modules, right? You can talk about, let's say, the professor, if you like some of the work he has published, or things like that. If you can include in your essay, that shows that you've actually done the research. So for this essay, there is a lot of research you have to do. Go to the university websites, read whatever work that those professors teaching your course have published. Any other sort of, they have different centers, right? Universities have different centers focusing on different areas of research or even activism sometimes. Look at what the university offers and put as much of that is relevant, of course, into your essay, and show that you have been very careful in your choice of courses. So they should obviously provide a good rationale for studying on the chosen 3 courses and linking them to their relevant experiences so far. So like I told you, this is a continuous story. You're trying to connect your past, that means whatever you have been doing up to this point, educationally, academically, and professionally. The present, that means why you're applying for Chevening, and what you're going to do with them, with whatever you learn in the future. So make sure all of these 3 things are linked. Given real thought to how they will achieve their career goals. Reading committees are looking for detailed, short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals. These goals should be SMART. So that's the acronym, which stands for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. So when you're writing your career plan, make sure that you have included short-term goals. That means what you want to do straight after you graduate with this qualification that you get, the master's, mid-term goals, and then long-term goals as well. So structure it in that manner and show how this degree doesn't, it won't take 10, 20 years for this degree to pay off. Show that it's going to start paying off as soon as you get the qualification and when you go back to your home country, and how you start working on it, working based on whatever you've learned in the UK. So, sorry, it's 4:30. Can I have around the 5 minutes, Radhini? Is that all right?
Yes, Tata, you
Yeah.
can have them.
So, yeah, so these criteria, I think you can access in the website itself. There's some repetition, so I'm not going into too much detail here. I've spoken about these things earlier. This is what you would have seen in the on the Chevening website itself. So the first essay is on leadership and influence. Second one on relationship building and networking, studying in the UK, and your career plan. So if you have any questions about this, feel free to ask during the Q&A, and also the slides will be sent to you so you can have a look at that. Before I wrap up, I just want to quickly talk about this. What I personally discovered, 3 pieces of advice that I got and things that I discovered along the way, just 3 things that I want to focus on. So and again, I just want to tell you that I applied for this twice. So the first time I wasn't successful, I didn't even get to the interview stage. So which means my essays weren't good, right? So the first time I applied, there was something wrong with the essays. So what I would tell you is the best piece of advice is to try to find someone who can give you actual advice or actual feedback and criticism on your essay. Send it to someone like that. Send it to as many people as possible. That's fine. But make sure there are people who will tell you what you need to hear. It's not just a friend who will say, okay, this is good, this is great. And again, we talk about constructive criticism. I personally think whether criticism is constructive or destructive depends on you, the person who's receiving the advice. That's, again, it's controversial, but that's how I feel. Even if it's someone who's going to give you destructive criticism, you can take it constructively. But I think a useful thing is to give it to someone who will even tear it apart if that's what you need, because you need to hear certain things that you might not be too keen to hear. So that's important. Find someone who will give you blunt advice and tell you what you need to hear. In addition to this, there is this balance that you have to strike. And I think that's very important when you're applying for scholarships or anything, right? There is this tightrope you have to walk between being true to yourself, your interests, what you believe in, your principles. And then there are certain things that you have to do, what we would call playing the game. Because Chevening expects certain things from you, or whatever you're applying for. You would have encountered this even in your personal life. But I think it's important to maintain that balance. It's not completely about just doing whatever you want. You can't do that either, because you have to sort of, get by in society, and to get opportunities, you have to bend a little bit. But compromise doesn't mean completely forsaking your principles or your values. Just telling people what they want to hear, maybe it will get you this scholarship, or maybe it will get you an opportunity into a university or whatever. But think about it in the long run, whether you'll actually benefit from that degree once you get there, whether you'll enjoy doing whatever you do after the degree. All of this you have to take into account, right? So try to find this right balance between being yourself, being authentic, being true to your interests and true to yourself, versus doing what is necessary and making those changes. And this is something that I was told by people who helped me with the essays and so on, which I found very useful. To a certain extent, you have to play the game. You have to remember why the scholarship is being offered, for example. I'll get to that next. So a natural segue into what I was just talking about. Don't lose sight of the big picture. I already spoke about this in detail, so I won't repeat much, but basically think of your application as this one big story. There has to be cohesion through all components in your application, not just the 4 essays, all the details you put down in the application, from work hours to job roles, whatever, your referees, all of that, and your essays. So it's one big picture. But in addition to it, remember why this scholarship is being offered. Nalanga mentioned that there is a requirement for you to come back for 2 years. This scholarship is being awarded by the FCDU because they want the scholars who receive these opportunities to come back and do something for their country. And you have to also think about things that the UK is doing with Sri Lanka, for example. So you have these social media pages that the High Commission runs, UK in Sri Lanka. Then there are websites you can go to and find out what sort of work is the UK government involved in with Sri Lanka. What are their interests? Is it in developing education, infrastructure? What are the UK's interests in Sri Lanka? And keep that in mind when you're writing your applications as well. And show how you, by getting this scholarship, will be able to contribute towards the work that the UK is doing in Sri Lanka, and also how you can directly influence this once you come back. So keep those things in mind. And finally, life outside Chevening as well. So remember that you have this life to lead outside Chevening, outside your master's program and all this. And remember that if you completely change your personality and all that for the sake of this scholarship, life outside the scholarship is not going to pan out too well in the long run. That's personally what I feel. So keep that in mind, and that connects with what I was saying earlier. And finally, do your research. So I spoke about this when we mentioned the, what do you call it, your course choices. So that's an example of where you have to do a lot of research into what courses are available, why you're picking this course, and so on. There's a lot of advice on the Chevening website. This is a must. Please go and check all of these things that's available on the Chevening website, and it'll answer most of your questions, I'm sure. But in addition to it, do your own research and support your application through the essays and so on. Right. 4:37, but I'm done. Ravini, you can
All
take over.
right. Thank you so much, Nath and Nalanga. I must say, I've sat through several sessions that we've done through EduAccess so far for Sri Lanka, and this is probably the most informative, most enlightening one that I've had the honor of attending, and I'm pretty sure that our attendees feel the same way. So, we can take a few questions now. So we have one in the chat box already. So Dushani asks, as mentioned, we need 2 referees, 1 academic and 1 professional. But if someone works as a temporary demonstrator / assistant lecturer in a specific university, their professional referees are still from the academic sector. Will that be a problem? Nath or Nalanga, anybody willing to take the question? You can both coordinate. Yeah.
I can answer this because I was in this exact position. I was an assistant lecturer at the University of Peradeniya when I applied, and both my referees were from the same workplace as well, from the same institute actually, because I studied at the Peradeniya University and I was working there. So, but then again, I made them write their reference letters, sort of with one with a professional orientation, the other with an academic orientation. So I got my former supervisor, academic supervisor, who was also then my colleague actually, to write a reference letter about how I was as a student. And I got my department head, whom I was directly reporting to write about my professional sort of conduct and my professional experiences. So that is to simply answer your question, no, that is not a problem. That should not be a problem at all, no. Anything to add to that, Nath, maybe?
No, I think you answered that. That's what the same advice I wanted to give. Just make sure that it's written in a way that sort of one person speaks to your academic ability and the other person speaks to your professional ability.
And also, I would say maybe sort of give them the context of this scholarship as well. Your referees should know what this scholarship is looking for and cater to that ideally. So ask them to highlight your leadership abilities and networking skills a little bit more if they know about it. And I also think it's very important that you pick 2 referees who really know you. It doesn't have to be the vice chancellor of the university, because that's very unlikely that he would know you at a personal level. So it has to be someone you worked with very closely. So my academic supervisor, for example, worked with me for all 4 years of my degree, and my department head has also worked with me closely by then for about 3.5 years. So in different capacities as well. So that is more important than the credentials of the person who's writing the reference for you. For an academic referee, I would say go for someone with a PhD. That is maybe slightly important, but for a professional referee, I don't think that matters as much. It has to be people with credentials, but it also has to be people who actually know you and can speak about you in detail.
Yeah, the context is quite important. You can even share some of your essays with them. So in my case, my referees actually helped me with my essays, so they already knew. But if they don't, giving that information would help them, write a reference that will sort of collaborate whatever you said in your essays.
Okay, thank you so much, guys. Any other questions? Feel free to unmute yourselves and ask us directly, or you can use the chat box. I will allow 1 to 2 minutes for that. So any questions at all?
Hi, my question is on the study plan. Do you need to be specific on the course we're choosing, or just selecting the university is sufficient?
Nath, do you want?
Yeah, so the study plan, you have to be specific when it comes to the courses, because when you're giving your course choices, you're not only mentioning the university, you're mentioning the specific course. So in your essay, specify why you've selected that course. So for example, if you're doing an LLM, why you're taking this specific LLM, let's say it's an LLM in human rights. So like that, you have to specify, you have to talk about the course, and even to the extent of maybe going into detail about who are the professors that you're interested in studying under, which modules are you planning to take, because all that information is on the university website, right? So you can take last year's, and usually universities keep the same program. So you can go into their website, look at what are the modules that are being included under the course, who are the professors teaching it, and you can talk about that. Just make sure that you convince them that the course is suitable for what you want to do with your career after you finish.
And also, it's a good opportunity for you to showcase that you've done your homework about these courses, that you really know what you're getting into. Like Nath said, it's really important to be as specific as possible and as detailed as possible. I remember in my essay, I mentioned that why I want to do this particular course is because there is this professor who does research in the exact line of research that I'm interested in, and that's something that no other university can offer, because human resources are not replaceable by other universities. You can say that if I don't get into this university, the other university also has a fantastic lab or a fantastic library, or any other sort of facility. But if it's a specific professor, you won't find that person anywhere else. So that's a great way to say that is why I want this particular program out of all. So yeah, you have to be, not only should you know the 3 choices, you also have to know them in detail as well.
Thank you so much, everybody. So I think with that, we should wrap up our session because it's getting quite late for you guys over in Sri Lanka, and it's getting a bit late for me and Nath as well. But thank you so much, Nath and Nalanga. So I have been very lucky to know and learn from both of you because I remember when I was applying for my master's degree, you guys gave me the same advice, and not necessarily for the Chevening scholarship, but like all the motivation and all of that. So it was only right that I used my personal connection with you guys and invited you on board for my little baby project here with Edu Access. So thank you so much, everybody. And of those of you who are part of our mentorship program, keep an eye out for an email. You will receive it, I think, within this week regarding your IDs, etc. And those of you who are not part of our mentorship program, well, you can look at our Instagram, LinkedIn. Sometimes we also are active on Twitter. And yeah, you can keep an eye out for when we start our next cycle of applications for our mentorship program. But thank you so much and have a great evening, everybody.
Thank you. And best of luck to all the applicants.
Thank you. All the best.